do this virtually unless he wants to. And Jonathan, do you mind doing it?
I'll be happy to do it. All right, let's please stand. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this opportunity to come together to do the important work of our city. Father, we pray for your wisdom and your guidance on our deliberations today. Father, may everything we think, do, and say bring honor and glory to you and for the betterment of our city. We pray for the men and women around this table and just their dedication to be civil servants and to just serve again our great city. We ask all this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Have the flag. This have the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. You want to do the roll call?
Chairman Brandenburg.
Here.
Mr. Brandon Henderson Jansenius.
Here.
Mr. Ron Dancy.
Yes.
Mr. J.P. Ferreira.
Here.
And Ms. Cecile Schoon is not here yet. Hopefully she'll come.
I did leave her a message about 5 minutes ago.
I know we have minutes to review, and I get way more emails than I care to admit. Were these sent out ahead of time? Like they were?
Yeah.
Okay, they were. Sorry. And any other comments or suggestions about the meeting minutes? Move we approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so show those being approved by unanimous vote. All right. Staff reports.
I got one email to our our new charter review advisory committee email. It is attached under item 6 to your packet. This person is disenfranchised because the meetings are during the business day. I told him I would pass his concern on to the board. If you have a better response for me, I'll be happy to see.
Yes, we could, staff could make him aware of the town hall on November 1st, Saturday morning, coffee and donuts included.
Board members, any other thoughts or suggestions on how to address this or if to address it? No. So Jonathan, if I could also add, make sure it's clear all the avenues for participation in person. Obviously on Saturday, there'll be, as I sent an email out, but I'll be there on the town hall on Saturday, that you have your meetings with managers or manager as well. And then, I mean, just a general acknowledgement that this email address is monitored. And so any suggestions that he wants to put in writing, please, I encourage participation. Totally fine with that.
And we have, Mr. Chairman, we've modified the community announcements for the city commission meeting of next Tuesday to include announcing the Charter Review Advisory Board will be joining the city commission for the town hall on Saturday, November 1st. Mm-hmm. And public affairs will continue to promote that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I respect that, but also I'm trying to be mindful of also the time that the other board members are putting into this throughout the day and compromise family time on that. I mean, it's very hard to make it available to everybody. So I think we've done enough virtue of the town hall meetings and the meetings with the manager and the email address. And so, but the last thing we want to do is stifle participation, but the email is going to get just as much acknowledgement as anything else is.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. All right. Thanks for sharing that. Jonathan, what other staff reports do you have?
None at this time, sir.
The attorney has also attached some documentation. I put it on staff reports. It is in response to a letter that was written by his office to the commissioners about the redistricting that may be of interest in your discussion. And
so
one from the
he's
supervisor of elections. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Jan. Good afternoon, everyone. An issue came up as far as the old lawsuit. It's called the Battles lawsuit. Caroline's there, and she'd be the best one to answer any questions about it. But this is at the time that the city did redistricting a couple of years ago. We went through the Voting Rights Act as well as the litigation. The commissioners did redistrict, and they included a majority minority district, which is one district where a majority of the of the population were minorities. And so they did do that. And but then also we had a brief discussion, very brief, about the Battles litigation. It wasn't really talked about that much. We did have representatives from the ACLU that were involved in the discussion in the NAACP. But the actual litigation itself, it was talked about, but it wasn't instrumental, I don't believe, in the policy decisions that the commission made a couple of years ago. That's provided for your background information. And of course, it's there as it may be relevant today or in the future.
Nevin, when you say it may be relevant, like maybe how?
Well, if the charter committee wanted to put in the charter that the districts would be at large, then obviously that's relevant as far as whether or not the Battles litigation would be binding or the order is binding today. So that would be one thing. So first, is that something that the policy issue is, would the Charter Review Committee think it's better for the city, for a variety of good policy reasons, to have at-large elections just like Bay County? If the answer is yes, we think that might be a good idea, then we need to look and see if there's flexibility to put that in the charter as it relates to the litigation. I know that
the status quo is we have a court decision mandating a minority district. But that's obviously not codified in the charter or it's just the way that lines are drawn. We're in compliance with the order as it is now.
Right.
The question would
Correct.
be, we want to do something that strays from the language of the order.
That's correct.
Okay.
So that's how it's relevant. As far as if you want to do something different than status quo, we would obviously need to look at that.
I also have two documents that I put at your table.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. One addresses some questions that the board had regarding other municipalities in the state of Florida that potentially use plurality voting. Panama City Beach does, versus majority plus one voting, which is what Panama City does. And then also you had asked for some examples of how other municipalities deal with compensation for commissioners and the mayor. And so that's the larger document stapled. I did a table and I reviewed a sampling of 21 different municipalities and their charters and provided a fair amount of information for you to review so that you get a feel for what other municipalities are doing in general. And then the second document is from Tallahassee. It's an ordinance from Tallahassee, and from their charter, excuse me. And this addresses the issue that you were talking about previously as to when to hold the elections. And I know within that discussion, we discussed that Florida statutes allow for a commission to set the dates, But in terms of the process as to whether to have one election date with a plurality, so only one, versus having the majority plus one, where there's the primary ahead of time, which is what we do now, sort of, and then moving that to November. This was all part of the same discussion. So I saw how Tallahassee does it, and so I wanted to provide what they do as because it seemed like it addressed.
So what do they do?
Well, first I'll explain what Panama City does. We have a general election in May, and then we have a nominating primary in April. And not only do we hold it in the spring at a different time, but the mechanism is slightly different. If we have two people running for election, and the election, then the primary, nominating primary, is in April, and one of those individuals gets a majority, then they don't go to the general election in May. It's just dealt with in April, and then it stops. In Tallahassee, they do it the opposite. If they have only two people in the August primary, then they skip the August primary, they skip the first election, and then their names are put on the general election in November. So it's just reversed. Our system, we skip the second election if it's not needed. They skip the first one. And this allows for there not to be a runoff after the general election.
Mm-hmm.
You have your primary, which is still in coordination with the state or the federal elections, which gets the largest amount of turnout, which was part of the discussion in terms of motivation for moving it, is getting the larger amount of turnout. So it seems to check off all those boxes. So I just wanted to share how they were doing it.
Yeah, I'm aware, Mr. Chairman, that there are some, and I know this was, I think, talked about by some of the elected officials in the past, because we have talked about maybe shifting the elections and, that example, if there were, more than two qualifying candidates, then you would have that primary in August. But as it stands now, you could have 5 candidates in April, but if one of them pulls off 50% plus one, they win in April. This change, and I believe how Tallahassee does and how other cities have done it, it doesn't matter what you get. The top 2 in August move to November, regardless of what those percentages are. So what it does is basically this would guarantee 2 candidates in November every even year.
And to add to that, we had the discussion that, what part can this, does the charter, what role does the charter play? And then what role does the commission play? The commission can move the dates, but that mechanism, that style of having 2 candidates at the second election versus the election being decided at the first primary election, that would be where the charter would come in.
All right, so the runoff primary system is determined by the charter, but the actual date of the election can be changed by the commission regardless of what's in the charter.
Correct.
All right. Can we double back on this Battles case again real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So,
And Mr. Chairman, Ms. Schoon has joined via Zoom.
oh, great. Cecile, can you hear us okay and everything?
Yeah, sorry, I had sent an email saying I was going to be appearing from afar because we're going to go and we're seeing our grandchild. And of course, my son, he counts too, but, and his wife. But I got the Zoom link, so I joined in. I heard a few minutes.
Okay, yeah, I mean, where did you join in? Is there anything we need to go back on? I just didn't see.
I joined about 8 minutes in.
Okay, all right. I mean, you being remote the other day didn't.
No, it's good.
It was fun for us.
It's fine.
All right, yeah, okay. Any other questions?
Chairman, if you don't mind, can we move through the next couple of items? Because the item number 10 is actually discussion about the elections. Before we get too deep into the business of the board, can we go ahead and take care of audience participation and your discussion items?
Yeah, I just have one more thing about
Okay.
I want to flesh out the rest of the staff stuff and then we can do all, yeah, we'll get to them.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff about the election procedures stuff? So on the battles case, just to get the full context of that. So that was somebody challenged that there wasn't a minority district at the time. And then whatever happened in the litigation, and then the city settled and said, okay, we'll have a minority district. That's right.
Well, the city's charter originally was set up back at the beginning of Panama City's existence, was set up as wards like we have now. And then along the way, I know by the early 1960s.
That is when it changed.
That is when it changed. And it was changed to at large. And then the city was sued in the early 1980s under a Voting Rights Act violation. And the settlement was that the city would go back to single member districts, but then add a what is called a majority minority district, where the neighborhood is kept together. The minority neighborhood is kept together as part of one of those wards.
And then that's been in place ever since.
Correct.
And then what's the context for, it looks like this thing got kicked around a little bit back in 2021, 2022, and then there's a letter in here, looks like from the NAACP challenging that. I mean, what's that stuff?
Well, the NAACP wanted the city to do redistricting because our wards had become population-wise, were no longer within the minimum 10%. And this was a lot due to the hurricane, because when the census came out, the Glenwood area was damaged very severely. And so it got too far apart in terms of ward population. And so they had just sent a letter saying that they were aware of that, and then they encouraged the city to do the redistricting. And so that was really part of it. And they wanted to participate in that.
And then,
And
go ahead, Evan.
there's two issues. One issue is at-large election. The issue that we were dealing with 2 or 3 years ago was that every 10 years you look and see whether or not the wards need to be redrawn. In the process of drawing those, then the ACLU and the NAACP said, well, don't forget, this Panama City has had a history of a majority minority ward. In other words, so that's where their involvement.
So that census triggered this and the redrawing. Okay.
Correct. And the whole at-large discussion was just really a minor issue that was mentioned. The real discussion had to do with drawing the district lines and the population demographics within those districts.
Okay. Any other questions about that redistricting stuff or anything for council on that? Ron, you good? Brandon?
Yes. Well, I think I'll come back to it once we want it until we get to.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have like substantive discussion on it, and not that we can't ask questions during that time too. Now's kind of the time to get all that fleshed out also. Okay. All right. With that, then audience participation.
I have one comment. My comment is, I'm
You'll need your name and address for the record, please.
really, Miss Jan.
Yes, ma'am.
I know we met walking out the other day, but Julie, what is your name again?
My name?
Yes, ma'am.
Brenda Lewis Williams. I'm at 2748 Oak Hammock Drive, 32401.
Thank you.
My comment is, as I look at this and navigating the Muni Code, or whatever that thing is called, to find the articles that you're addressing in here is really not that easy. And for folks who do not have access to technology, it's even harder if they're looking at home, etc. My suggestion is to do as the city commission meeting does, is to highlight it and add that additional information so that folks know what you are speaking of. It took me a couple of days to navigate that system, and I'm not that there's not a neon sign on my forehead flashing stupid. But aside from that, it more than anything, it is to keep the citizenry informed of what's going on at these meetings.
When you say highlighting, what do you mean?
At the city commission meetings, they have the agenda item, and then there's the explanation is in blue so that you can tap on it and have readily available information and or dig further from that information. You don't do that with this one.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually, it seems like a super easy thing to fix. So like almost have like a hyperlink on there to where they can click and get access to the charter on the notice.
Well, that's probably what it is, but I'm technologically challenged, so I have to speak the language I speak.
I'm hearing what you're saying. And the thing in blue that you click on, absolutely. Yeah, Jan, is there any issue with putting a link on the notice to the
Not at all.
to the charter?
Can do that.
And then on the notice, it's on the agenda, which we'll get to that as well. To the extent that we can put on the notice the substantive articles that we're going to be discussing, I think that would help as well. We pretty much know that answer. We've scripted that out throughout the rest of the years here. So
The meeting notice, you mean?
yeah,
Okay.
can we not do that?
Well, sure. Do whatever you
Well,
want.
the hyperlinks are typically backup information as provided by the respective department on that item. So we have like agenda item requests. We really don't have an agenda item request.
Well, putting a link to the charter that's very easy.
Yeah.
That can just go stock on the notice.
In fact, we could probably even put that on the agenda page as its own link, like for the charter if you want, because you're racking and stacking the agendas anyway for the charter. And we could put a button for directly to the charter. I mean, the charter's on the website.
Yeah.
It is, Panama City has theirs such that it says charter, Panama City Charter. You hit the link and bam, it's right there, and the information is readily available.
So the city commission does it well. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, they do.
All right. Well, then Jan and Jonathan, to the extent that we can model our notices and meetings after what the city does, let's try to do that. And we can work together on the next notice and agenda to make sure that happens.
Absolutely.
That's pretty easy. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Brendan. Got it. Something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the topic of
I need your name and address, please.
Daniel Schultz, 330 Mercedes Avenue, Panama City, Florida. On the topic of elections, I think at-large elections could be a mistake. I think the idea of having each ward is important in the vein that the needs of my ward are not the same as someone else's ward. And I think by oversaturating these areas, I think you could disenfranchise a lot of voices, and we don't want to see that happen. In addition, I want to say I think it would be a great idea to move the election to the November ballot. I think that's a great idea. Our number one goal as a local government should be participation. And there is no question that we'll get a much larger participation in the local process if it was on the general ballot. Something that we've talked about, but that I think should be a serious conversation for sure, because we see such a small turnout locally anyway. So if we give people an opportunity to learn more about city politics, they will. So that's all I got to say.
Jonathan, is it appropriate for us to ask the public questions?
That's your prerogative, sir.
Do you guys mind if I ask Daniel some stuff?
Ask me a question.
So,
Go ahead.
you ran, you went through a runoff. I mean, I'd say me and you were friends. We've never hung out socially, but we've seen each other around. What's your feeling on the primary versus runoff procedure? Do you think it makes a difference?
So let me make sure that I understand it. So if we were to have, we wouldn't have a municipal in April, we would instead have a primary in August. Is that right?
Well, the current system that you
Right.
went through was what the charter calls a nominating primary, but that if one candidate receives a majority plus one, then there's no general election. You don't go to, so you skip the second election.
Okay.
The example that I provided, based on the discussion that was at the last meeting, in moving to November would be that if there's only two candidates that qualify, then the primary is skipped and it goes to the general election. So it's just it's just a question of which.
You can do like one election, winner take all, whether they get all the votes or none of whatever, just whoever gets the most wins. You can do a system like what you did, where if you don't get the majority, then you run off with the first and second place. Or you can do like a primary system where you narrow it down to two, and then two go on to the general ballot, and then winner goes there.
How would a primary system work with a nonpartisan office?
It's just top two vote getters move on.
Okay.
Or you say top two move on no matter what the top two get. Or you could say if the top vote getter gets a majority, then they just win.
And that would look like August and November, is that right?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, so a very specific example would be, and there are nonpartisan elections, the school board primaries are in August.
Yes.
But in the example of the last election, so upon qualifying, which would probably shift to June to align with state, Mr. Reese and Mr. Street would have immediately gone to November because only two candidates
Yeah, that
qualified
makes-
in Ward
yeah,
4.
okay, I got
In Ward 1, y'all would have all, the four
Had
of
to
you
have
would
an
have gone-
election.
Correct, in August. Sorry, the three of you, in August, and then you and Mr. Hughes would have advanced to November. The other advantage being you would have had 9 weeks for runoff rather than 30 days.
Yeah, I quite like that idea. Yes, I did.
Which one, the primary one?
The primary idea, yes, absolutely. The only thing that was throwing me was because primary sounds so partisan, but a non partisan primary,
I
yeah.
thought the same thing when I heard it too. I thought
Right.
primary inherently means partisan.
Right. That's kind of I was like, who's nominating? But no, I think that that's a great idea. Absolutely. The idea of having a runoff or an opportunity for someone else to move on gives the public more opportunity to get to know those individuals, to learn more about the election, to tune in more. And it gives an opportunity for outsiders like myself to come in. I mean, I think if you have a winner take all system, that you'll get much stagnation or change. It will become stagnant, and I don't think you'll see diversity in the electorate because there's not as much of an opportunity for an outsider to win.
So, go ahead, sorry.
Just to add and to clarify, so the charter uses really the term nominating as opposed to primary. It does become confusing in that way, but it's not really a partisan primary.
Right.
It's a nominating election.
Right? It's just we nominate whoever for this office.
Who the two top candidates are.
Yeah, and the other example would be how it would show up on an August. For example, if you were, say, NPA, like that's your actual registration, then only a school board race, Panama City's race, maybe the judges, that would show up on your ballot. But if you were nominating a Democrat nominee for, say, Congressional District 2,
Right, or for
Republican, you would also have that one on your respective ballot. But
Right.
if you're NPA,
but everybody would get
everyone would get that.
just like the school board, same.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
yeah, I think that's a great idea. The school board, so we would essentially model it after the school board. It would be pretty close to their system. Is that right? We would have a primary and then they move on to a general if they have another.
No, I'm pretty sure the school board is winner
It's
takes
just-
all in
oh,
August.
okay. I gotcha.
Interestingly, the county used to have a runoff. It was 30 days after the primary in August. If you didn't get in either a Republican or a Democratic primary, if you did get 50% plus one, there was runoff 30 days later to determine who would go to November. But that was changed, 20 years ago, Mr. Dancy?
One of my elections, there was 3 of us, and
In the August primary.
in the August, and I missed the 50% plus one by just a few, and then had to move to November and finally win. But yeah.
So Daniel, when it comes to moving the election to November, I'll go ahead and signal, I tend to agree with you. I tend to agree that more participation is better. The counter argument, though, is also if you run in November, it's very noisy politically, that there's presidential elections or gubernatorial elections or congressional elections, and that it inherently becomes political because that's what's on the news, that's what's in everybody's mind, and they immediately start asking you about statewide or national issues which have no application. You don't have any say on the city commission about abortion or gun rights, right? So that's kind of the counter. I'm just kind of curious what your take is on that.
I think you're absolutely right. It'll happen, but I think it's a trade-off. I mean, everything is a trade-off, and I think it's worth it for the increased participation. I can tell you that when I ran, those were still some of the mostly asked questions. I mean, I was asked quite often, do you support Trump? Do you not? People do ask that stuff anyway. I mean, it's just kind of, the country is in a partisan place. It's in a political partisan place. So it would be impossible to hold elections that were not incredibly partisan. And so I think that, like I said, if we get increased partisanship, but we get increased turnout, I think it's worth it.
So just for the record, if I may, Mr. Chairman, so you still felt there was kind of this partisan undercurrent even in the spring of an odd year.
Yeah, definitely.
So I appreciate that. That's actually super.
No doubt. You should run and maybe you'll.
I'm good in the seat I'm in right now. Thank you.
I got
you. Other board members, any other sort of dialogue or questions for the public comments or anything like that?
But you're doing a great job, by the way. This is
so far we haven't done much.
Important board. Important board. Very important board.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with the importance of it. We'll see. So far, it's been good, but
process is young.
Brandon?
Yeah, Cecile. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. It's sort of hard to be in the room and then look, at the screen to see. So I'll raise my hand and I'll also make a verbal comment when I want to say something to let you know. I'm largely persuaded by what Dan has said also for pretty much some of the same reasons. I think that there are things that can be done in the process to reaffirm that the race is nonpartisan. Some can be done by volunteers, like the League of Women Voters when they hold their forums, and we can really emphasize that, and that can be part of the education that the city commission can put out there about that. But there's going to be people asking those questions anyway. But I think the additional noise of having the city commission race in November can be muted by in terms of causing the concern of having so much information out there at a very important election. I think we can sort of try to anticipate and try to work against that, and then we'd have the benefit of more participation. So I'm definitely leaning in that direction.
Thank you, Cecile. And I apologize. You were not one of the spotlight people, so you're obviously on the screen, but you're kind of tucked up in the corner. And then Jan, thank you. You beat me to it. So now you're front and center, and I will make an effort to make sure to call on you because I know you're a little bit of a disadvantage not being here in person. So sorry about that. Any other questions or comments before we get into discussion items? All right. Audience, thank you guys. And we're not so rigid that if you've got strong thoughts, please chime in. We're going to debate amongst ourselves, but I'm not going to stifle anybody. Just real quick, I know we're going to get into agenda item 9 here, but it does seem like word's been getting out on the actual charter review process. Their staff did a press release on this. News picked it up. Tom Lewis, who is literally my next door neighbor, texted me and asked me to be on their local politics show and talk about the charter. So that was kind of fun. So we did that. I think they just aired it the other day, and then it's on their website too. So it's just getting more exposure on those types of things. And then if you guys do check it out or want the opportunity to speak, Tom said he's happy to have, they need content for that stuff. There's plenty of local politicians to talk to, but they want to do it every week and you start running out of people to talk to. So, if any of you guys also want an opportunity to do that, or if you think something got misrepresented, please tell me. Like, I'm trying to just speak on behalf of the board. And then we have Jonathan. All of y'all are welcome, but I'm going to go to the town hall meeting Saturday. That's in person here, right?
November 1st, yes. And everybody was flagged. It's on everybody's calendar, and we're planning to set up for all 5 of y'all to be there. So.
Well, in that case, yeah, please show up. I don't want to have like 4 pairs there. Okay.
Yeah, and it will be with the city commission. It will be with the city commission. So, and again, it's really the town hall is for both the advisory board, but as well as the city commission, just to hear any feedback from the community. So the town halls are for the community, whereas the workshops are more for the elected officials. So this is just, obviously there'll be some dialogue, but it's really just to hear from the community their thoughts on anything regarding the city or the charter review process.
And then, what was it, 2 Mondays ago, I joined you for your coffee with the manager.
You did, yes, sir, on the first Monday of October.
And so, Jonathan gets a very engaged, half a dozen people there, maybe more at times.
And then probably another 10 or so online.
Yeah, so I think we're getting to the audience that's the most likely to have comments. And so word seems to be getting, like, Daniel, how'd you find out about it? I know you're pretty engaged.
I just know about everything. Yeah, I've just known that you've had it. I've watched a few online, and so thought I would show up in person.
So you're gonna. My perception is you're gonna almost have this grassroots effort of the people that are the most engaged with city operations, and then it'll kind of funnel out from there. So hopefully, the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish by getting public participation, even just by virtue of this meeting, you're starting to see. Should we get 3 at this meeting? 5? Okay. I don't think if we have any other ways of getting this out there or any. Same thing with, we talked, Cecile discussed this with staff. If any of you guys want your own opportunities to go address the public, they're willing to help you guys facilitate that. So keep that in mind. All right. Discussion on Article 9, the city commission and mayor commission structure. I think where to start here. JP, you want to keep going on that?
Can we just, it's in sections. Can we just do a section at a time and then?
Well, yeah, that's kind of, is that,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not all over the place. If we take the form of government, hash that out and take the next block or however you want to do it.
Agree. Yeah.
Yeah, just for the record, online, it's item number 9, but it's actually Article 2.
Sorry, item number 9. That's what I misspoke. I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure everyone knows exactly what section you guys are talking about.
So, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but when we had our discussion, my interpretation was that we seem very content with the mayor or commission manager structure, that there was no appetite for going to a stronger mayor system or commission only system or anything like that.
I agree. That's
Ron, did that answer that question?
Yeah. And so if we're not making any changes, we don't need a motion or anything. We just need to keep moving, right? Is that how we want to?
Yeah, do we need a vote on each of them or how?
So I think there will be things that we will discuss, particularly the term of office of commissioners. So
yeah,
we will.
If we change it, we need to vote.
I would ask Mr. Zimmerman as the parliamentarian for all things city. Yeah.
I missed the question. I apologize.
As we reach certain decisions, what's the formality that we need to do as a board? Do we need to move to adopt certain things, or can we just take notes on stuff and council takes direction on it, or how do we need to do this?
Okay. It's I can tell you how our founding fathers did it back in 1780s. They worked as a committee of a whole. They voted, but with the understanding they would vote again. And so the purpose was to vote on a section, knowing just so they put a pin down that yes, that's what we're going to do, but with the leeway that there would be one more vote at the appropriate time to approve the entire document. So it's always handy to have a vote because then we know where at least you were thinking at that time with total freedom to change your mind as further things develop. But anyway, that's how they did the U.S. Constitution.
So, and I don't want to go off topic here, but I do have a question for Nevin. As I've read some of the other charters, even if they have the same general structure, they tend to use either different verbiage or like more robust verbiage. I mean, it just seems like Panama City Beach's charter is just more thorough. Tallahassee's charter is more thorough. Is there any discussion or do you guys have any recommendation as far as if we're going to keep the same structure, do we literally don't change a word or are there ways to make it clearer or do we need to do that?
I don't have a recommendation right now, but obviously it has to do with if we change things, then it has to be voted on by the electorate. So if you're just changing things to have it read better, have it be more modernized, which obviously there are a lot of things that do need to be modernized, I believe that it would be voted on. But that's a great question, and Caroline's going to look at it for us because there are some things that seems like that are not substantive that maybe we could go in there and like an editor and change things. But let us think about that. That's an excellent question.
There might be certain natural breakpoints, like maybe perhaps after today. First of all, we're going to change something. The idea that we meet for 6 months and then say, what, that was perfect, is pretty low.
Right.
But
what I'm thinking of, for example, the gender references are very dated, so obviously that needs to be updated. Whether we really have to have a referendum election on it, I'm not certain, but we're going to look at that as well.
Kind of what I anticipate just through my experience of rewriting governing documents is like when we get to the commission mayors or the commission manager mayor structure, elections, city manager, city attorney, that might be a decent breakpoint to go, okay, put pen to paper on stuff and then we can wordsmith if we need to from there. But to Ron's point, I think if we just have a motion to leave the current commissioner or commission manager structure in general, then we can build up that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, so, in something like that, in this example, if no one really moves to get into some big discussion and it's like everyone's like immediately shaking their head and you move on. Yeah. But if y'all spend 30 minutes talking about it with a lot of different ideas and thoughts, then at the end of that, it might be prudent to say, just for clarity's sake, we might need something more formal. That's how I typically do it as city manager. If I ask, would y'all like us to do this and there's no objection, no real conversation, I think that it's a pretty clear consensus. But if they ask a lot of questions and deliberate for 30 minutes, I then say staff would appreciate like a formal motion and direction from the commission as to what you guys would like to see done. So I just offer that just depending on how
Well, I like the idea, kind of to Ron's suggestion was let's memorialize the general commissioner manager structure is what we're recommending. And then we can build on that. Is that fair? So,
yeah, I think that's fair, but our charge has been to make recommendations to the city commission for changes. That's not a change. Correct? So, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I reckon we need to go back and figure out what we're doing.
I think, so each section, I think that we make a formal motion for section 13. Like, are we going to make changes?
No.
We have a discussion, we move forward. Then we go to section 14, which is the commission created. That defines the ward structures and how many commissioners. we know we're gonna discuss that. So we make a motion, have a discussion, then we move forward with formal vote before moving to section 15.
I'll handle however you guys want to. I think we're down in the weeds. I think we're all on the same page. Okay. We want to do this and whether we need to dot what I win. I don't have strong feelings.
Okay, so let's try this. I make a motion that we affirm section 13 as written.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Cecile?
Aye. But I'm voting aye with the understanding as we go through, we've already said we may go back and need to either change the substance of a preliminary vote or decide, as I think you mentioned, that we want to change some of the language to clarify in some way. So with that understanding, I vote aye.
Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Schoon can fully participate in the discussion, but she cannot vote remotely, just for the record.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it was, and I didn't realize, I missed the memo you were calling in, Cecile, but under the pandemic rules, you could vote remotely, but then the rules reverted back where you can't vote remotely. But just for an example, the motion to affirm, I still take that as staff will go back and you all can go back and look at whether or not the language should be adjusted. So
Okay.
To me, you're affirming the substance or the substantive part of that section with total freedom to go back, and we'll look at that for everyone too.
Yeah, I think for purposes of anybody who has to be remote, if there's something that you had to count votes, then certainly, for legal reasons, my vote wouldn't count, but I still would like to vote just so everybody knows where I stand. And everybody, can go from there.
That is, from my perspective, that is fine.
Okay.
Not to ask Ron to pull back his motion, but I think the idea, there are things as I'm looking at this in Article 3 that I still think we want to debate. Like Section 18, Article 3 talks about the term of the commissioners along with the term of the mayor. It also discusses in Section 29 the duties and the powers of the mayor.
I think we're just doing section 13.
Well, section 13.
Just 13.
That's it.
So go ahead.
So I looked at Article 2.
No, just section 13.
Just
section
Oh, my bad.
13.
Okay, well, there we go. That's right.
Just one sentence.
Excuse me.
That's one section.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yes.
Y'all just made Jan's day.
Daniel just said what a great job we're doing.
Mess up now, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, then understood. Yes, then I'm in favor of approving Section 13 as written. Okay, great. Okay. Who wants to introduce other issues within Article 2 for discussion?
Well, let's go to section 14.
Yes.
I mean, I think the big one there is the 5 commissioners. Anyone have any thought about the 5 commissioners?
I do. I have a thought on the overarching 10-year census. So in an effort to probably eliminate, not problem solve for future commissions, how do we build in that there's always a 10-year census, right? That's going to review the battles case. Like, how do we prevent the battles case getting brought up every 10 years, right? And we still stay within the 1965 voting regulations, right? Knowing that the census is quickly changing. Like, Ward 2 demographics are not what they were in 2019. They're not today what they were in 2019. So those are going to shift. How do we build that in so that we accommodate that shift, that it does come up for review every 10 years?
What do you suggest?
You mean about the redistricting every 10 years?
Redistricting, to ensure that the representation is fair across all wards, whether or not there is a 5th ward. This has 5 commissioners. Having an opportunity at the 10-year.
One of those, sir, is mayor commissioner at large. So they refer to 5 commissioners. The mayor is included. Just his technical title is commissioner at large, but we've referred to him as mayor.
We've also got, is it Ward 3 in North Panama City?
Correct.
That's new and growing very quickly. could it be debated that they don't have fair representation being so far from Panama City as a whole? How do we ensure that we constantly, every 10 years, review that?
I know that is the population an automatic thing that sets it off, or is there, because, you know, and like for Congress, you got to do it basically every 10 years or now mid-cycle.
Everybody does it every 10 years.
But is there something that mandates the city to do it every 10 years, or they just do it once the population has it been done every 10
You
years?
must do it after the sense that.
After the census. So the city has to redistrict
But
after.
you can redistrict earlier than that.
Yeah, right.
If there's some huge.
Yeah.
Life-altering population shift.
But as
Say we annexed in another city, we could,
Yes,
yeah,
that's true.
but every 10 years, it's going to get redistricted one way or another. Right?
Right.
So we're in there now. I think that this thought that, because I think only the charter can add or remove commission seats, right? Is that the understanding?
that is my understanding.
Right. That's good. And so the question then becomes, you know, in this case, the city hasn't done this in 60 some years. One of the thoughts could be that you have a system where every 10 years, the board looks at it to see if there's an addition. Just the thought. The other thing that I was, you know, we talked about, I talked about last meeting, but I do think that if it can't be done by ordinance, it should be done by ordinance. And this, I know that, and the League of City folks told us about how, you know, we can recommend for the city commission to look at something to do that I don't think, you know, when I was talking about doing an apportionment sort of amendment, that's something that might be handled by ordinance where they look and say, you know, right now, basically we have 8,500 residents per ward, that the ordinance could do it to where then something gets added and it automatically triggers the commission to add something to the charter. That'd be, so, you know, because they mentioned something about writing a memo at the end for things that the commission should look at. And I think that might be better suited for our elected officials to go kind of change that way. Couple thoughts there. Not that they were very clear.
Ron, what do you think?
Well, I think every 10 years you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
I think the federal court order plays into that when you, to keep that the letter of the law, when you redistrict, you have to keep that, was it majority board in the scope. And so,
With the Supreme Court case pending about the Voting Rights Act right now. But
so, I mean, that's, it's already there, you know, it's already there.
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, if I, assuming a little bit what Mr. Henderson is suggesting, and I think the answer to his question is, if we remain with 4 separate wards with ward-specific voting, knowing the trajectory of the growth of Panama City, it will be very, very difficult to maintain a minority-majority district. The way this, that's just a mathematics equation with the way the city's growing. I was not involved in the redistricting effort. I know Ms. Smith and Mr. Zimmerman were 3 years ago with the prior city manager and Mr. Mark Anderson. So I think they could speak to it, but I believe it was, I mean, there was some significant changes that had to move away from prior wards. And a large part of that was because of the growth of Panama City, or the development and the accelerated growth of Panama City North. And just we refer to it as Panama City North and Panama City proper, just so we know what your conversation about.
Separate but related question. Is there any concerns with the status quo? Like as we are today, any talk about changing the number of wards or any of that type of stuff?
yeah, that was my question. Any support for adding a seat?
Yes, for Panama City North specifically, whether that's today or 6 months or a year from now. The discussion being fair representation for Panama City North. And then it's going to cascade into the city commission can take care of this, but the fire department access up there, those streets being redone, like all the stuff the city commission is going to be taking care of. Which will be,
Well, yeah, I mean, not to deflect, but I mean, before we talk about growth trend over the next 10 years, I mean, are you suggesting that we go to a 5th ward in this charter?
Yeah,
I'm asking.
Yeah, that's kind of the question. Is there support today for the addition of a 5th ward?
is there documentation to support that there is a need for a 5th ward right now? And what would that documentation look like? What would it take?
I think the state only does population estimates, so I'm not sure that there's any valid documentation that would support the addition of another ward. But what if you crafted some language like as each district reaches a certain number, then a new district has to be added. So it's like, you know,
And that-
you only have 30
that was-
kids in your class in school.
That was my
Yeah.
suggestion last time,
Yeah.
but the more I've looked at that, I think that might be something that this commission has to take up. I don't know that, partly about not hamstringing future commissions because we put something into the charter like that and then they're stuck having to create 20 wards in the future, which creates other problems.
Yeah.
I do want to add that I did specifically look for that when I was
Yeah.
going through these 21
Mhm.
charters and a few other charters that I didn't put on the list. And I did not find anywhere where there was any kind of triggering mechanism to add an additional.
I have strange ideas. I know. I'll admit to that.
So I have two thoughts. Number one is not to argue with Brandon, but like, I think the status quo works. And I think this is a degree of a solution looking for a problem. And I'm not saying that soon that won't be a concern, but it's just not a concern for me. Like, I'm pretty good about saying my 2 cents and we may disagree. And I think it could get very complicated to put in automatic formulas and triggering mechanisms to create wards. But I do like the idea that either a certain periodic review or certain objective criteria then triggers a review. Because then we're all assuming the growth is to the north, but I never even contemplated that if the city took on another municipality, there could be other instances where at that point it just deserves more scrutiny and then another board can convene and provide a recommendation. That would be my 2 cents.
I think I'd be apt to do that. Every 10
Yeah.
years for the census, have a formal review
Mhm.
that doesn't get forgotten about for 50 years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that to me is like
Yeah,
a deal breaker.
because I
Like,
think
we
that-
can't do this every 50 years.
Yeah, that's the problem. The charter has to, the review board has to meet every 10 years to then look at the census and say, okay, it's maybe time to create a new board.
And let the current commission at the time make that decision.
Exactly.
That's fine.
I think that's the,
One of the challenges is, we think, voting and representation, but, the wards are not created based on registered voters. Our kiddos are in the census number for Ward 1 because that's who you're representing. So you may have, and I'll just pick an even number, you may have 5,000 voters across all 4 wards for 5,000 residents across all 4 wards for a total of 20,000 population. But you may have, 1,000 voters in Ward 1. You may have 800 voters in Ward 3. You may have 1,100 in Ward 2, and you could have 1,300 in Ward 4. It really, so you don't see, and Mr. Zimmerman, Ms. Smith, please correct me if I'm wrong. But, you say Ms. Smith too, you're actually killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're not, I mean, to my knowledge, you're not creating the wards based on registered voters. It's on population.
Yeah.
So,
People living there.
and again, that includes our kiddos who aren't even anywhere close to being adults. It's 1 year old to 108 years old. I mean, it's everybody. It's not just registered voters.
So go back to Brandon. I mean, do you want to have a discussion on adding another ward in this charter? The males. So then if we do some degree of charter review, which I think we all agree needs to happen, is it just purely chronological, 5 years, 10 years, less than 60? I think we all agree on that, right? Or is it based on some degree of population growth, or is it tied to the, within so many months after every census? What's the best way to do that? I guess I'm looking more so like for other board comments than.
Should there be some
I agree.
requirement to require a charter review X number of years, every 10 years?
and that's something that has to be done by the commission, right? The commission's the one that has to create that.
Unless y'all put it
we
to
put
the
it-
charter and then the voter
Yeah.
confirm it, then it could be automatic.
And we put that in the charter that we have to meet every 10 years.
There are many city charters that have that.
There
I
are.
think we should have a charter every 10 years.
Moving it
Keep
from
clean.
as needed to like a required timeline.
Well, because I think it solves this problem, because I feel that it will certainly be politically apt every time after every census. They'll want to talk about how many seats there are and if we need to add or take away.
The census is done every 10 years.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So was it 2021, 2031? Or
It's going to be it's the second year of each decade. So it'll happen again, or it'll be publicized like in 2032.
Yeah, redistricting normally happens 2 years.
Yeah.
Typically.
So when you get to the new decade, they kind of start the process and then it's effectuated in that second year. So 2022.
So what if we mandated one in the fourth year of every decade, starting in 2034?
Looking at you.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me too. Mr. Zimmerman, any concerns?
I got to check my schedule.
Oh,
No concern at all. It is common to have mandatory reviews and require to appoint another charter review committee.
I think that's very reasonable. Following every time the city's redistricted. I think that's a good trigger in my mind.
I think so too, because I feel right now it's too early to pull the trigger on changing the boards, but I know that it's going to come and it will be a problem.
I couldn't agree more.
That's the sense I have. It's too early now, but it's going to continue to change.
So you guys know the mechanics. I'm asking staff better than I do of the census. Would it be sufficient to just say the fourth year of every decade, or within 12 months of a new census, or does it matter?
The statute usually says so many months after a census, I think.
But there wasn't
But we can,
mandating another census in the interim. Am I making that up?
I mean, if any president were to trigger that, I would assume that based on the wording that I'm hearing y'all talk about, that it would probably trigger a mid-decade review as a city. I would defer to the lawyers.
Trends. I mean, to me, it makes sense that if there's a census, we need to convene the advisory board within.
Okay. We'll look at that and make a recommendation or suggestion.
12 months of the results, yeah.
Yeah.
In a sense, because that way that we could have we get to the trick there. You got to do the board before you do the redistricting, because then the redistricting folks will know how many wards they're drawing. We'll leave that for 10 years from now.
So,
Brandon?
Yes, Cecile.
Okay, one comment. We're in a time of a lot of legal flux. As every time you look at the news, there's some challenge, some precedent that's being changed or challenged, but I want to share with everybody that may have an impact on us tying automatic reviews to anything that's done politically. And that is, there's a case, with the United States Supreme Court, 2019 case, and I'll get the site in just a minute. I'll look at my phone. But that's the Rucho versus Common Cause. And in that case, the United States Supreme Court, by a close margin, 5-4, decided not to prevent political gerrymandering. Out and out, I think it was in North Carolina. We are doing this because we want more of this party congressional representatives or something like that. And very, very heated discussions. And it was decided, and the quote was pretty much, we're going to allow this because the United States Constitution does not have what Florida has, and Florida has fair districts amendments, which the United States Supreme Court looked at and used as a prime example of preventing political gerrymandering. And they said that the law of the fair districts would essentially prevent political gerrymandering, and that they were clear and enforceable. And that was their response to the dissent that thought that allowing political gerrymandering was horrific. And what the Supreme Court said is, we're not saying it's good, we're not saying it's bad. We're just saying we don't have a Florida fair districts preventing this across the nation. And Florida was the number one site, and they cited 4 or 5 other states that had also taken action to prevent political gerrymandering. All that to say, we need to be careful about putting any automatic triggers just because a political entity somewhere, whether it be national, state, is urging that to be done. Because we have our foundational document, which is our state constitution, says no, you cannot do it. And the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, has looked at it already and has held it up as an example of ways to prevent it. So all that to say, if there were a challenge down the road because there was political, there's political discussion going on now for, out of cycle, so to speak, redistricting. And if there's a legal challenge, the Supreme Court has already evaluated our Fed Districts amendments and said that they would essentially prevent that. So I just don't want us to tag our automatic, let's look at this again in the charter, to things that are political.
Okay. And you think that the perception would be that tying it to the updated census becomes political?
If there is a census that's called, and that's what's on the table right now, for political reasons, then yes, that would be a big problem. The 10-year census, which is the standard, I do not see a problem. So that's a big improvement from the 60 years that our charter has remained untouched and possibly unlooked at, so for that would be, I think, a reasonable, I don't see as outright political at this point, but to tie it to the 10-year census. But to tie it to when any political figure says, hey, I want to do, a redistricting, I think is going to be a major problem.
All right. So your position is that any off-cycle census is inherently political, so we should not tie a mandatory review to every census, but only tie it to the typical 10-year census.
That's essentially good at winnowing things down. I'm a little more long-winded, but yes, that's what I'm saying. And I'm saying that this has been looked at and argued strenuously. And the Supreme Court recently has said that our fair districts forbid this.
Okay. So then do we have alignment on requiring a charter review on the 4th year of every decade?
So I did want to clarify one thing, and I, having served or worked almost a decade in Congress, I do know. So when you say the 2030 census, that'll be the next census is 2030. That actually happens in 2030. And so
let's do this.
Yeah. So I'm saying, so keep in mind.
Go draft. I think the spirit of this is clear. When the data comes out on the new census, there should be a charter review.
Correct.
Yeah.
However the language needs to work, just go draft a provision that says whatever the language is that says that the census is out, the numbers are out, that on that regular 10-year interval, then the charter review should convene.
May I comment on this? What I see commonly in charters is they will pick a beginning date for something and then say, for example, 2034, which you mentioned, they'll say, this will happen in 2034 and then every 10 years afterwards to keep it simple. And since the census is mandated in the U.S. Constitution, it's supposed to happen in 2030, regardless of what's going on. So you could tie it to your
Somebody on the
date as opposed to.
Does the spirit of I think we're asking for clear.
Yeah, we want them to write the language and work through the dynamics.
Yeah.
Okay. If it was special business, we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
I think there's some detailed trickiness, but yeah, so we need to.
I agree.
Would you like us to come up with some language?
The spirit's very clear that
which is every 10 years?
when the data comes in, census on that 10-year basis, within a year, the charter review should be convened.
Okay.
But not every census.
Right, the regular 10-year.
Just
Just
There you go.
mandated.
There's your language. Census is mandated by the US Constitution.
Yeah, let me just, before I forget, I found the site for the Rucho case. It's 588 US 684, 2019. And they actually talk about Florida. It's really kind of powerful. I was disappointed with their final decision, but I was very proud that the work done with our Fair Districts amendments was held out. And they actually also cited litigation that the league had done, 172 Southern 2nd 363, with approval. And that was on the redistricting case. I have another comment to make, and that is just generally something for us to be careful about with minority-majority districts. It will be interesting and painful for somebody, whatever the decision it comes out in the recent oral argument on redistricting. I forget what state, maybe it was Louisiana, but the state that it was just argued, and it looked like there would be some further deconstruction of the Voting Rights Act, I guess, Section 2. And how would that comport with the Battles case? And I think that's a really complicated, difficult question, and one that we should be very careful of. For example, if the Voting Rights Act, Article 2, if there's a ruling that now in 2025 that we no longer have to do that, I wouldn't say that would automatically weaken the Battles case. You know, it doesn't necessarily work backwards, because the historical facts and the evidence that was placed in that case could be very, very different from what's going on in the state. I think it was Louisiana. But so I don't know that the Battles case is going to go down or be weakened necessarily by any present day review of the Voting Rights Act.
So Caroline and I guess Nevin, just like over time as laws have changed, either the charter gets updated automatically, or certainly the city commissioners can ask that if something, some legal significant event happens, the commission can obviously propose a charter to the citizenship without the review committee at all, right?
Yes.
Right.
So if that happens, I think they can just take it on their own volition to process something.
And I believe Caroline and I, we have a sense of what you're looking at, so we don't need any further clarification on the every 10-year. If you have to redistrict, or if you do a look after a census, then there'll also be a charter review. We'll give you some suggestions to choose from.
So that adds the sections to the charter, because I don't find where this charter has any review date in it at all presently.
It would be a new section that would set up a automatic review, automatic appointment of probably a charter review committee.
I like it.
Okay.
Do you have something you wanted to add?
All right, Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so we're all on the same page that we don't want to have to review it, multiple times within a 10-year cycle if it was ordered from the state or from, the federal government. So if new data is produced by the feds or by the state in the middle of a decade, does that affect us at all? Or do we just come back and look around at what we have locked in as the 2034 deadline, where we will reconvene and look at it? What happens if prior to then new data comes in?
So the city commission can always propose changes to the charter. They can do it every meeting if they wanted to and have it get it approved by the citizenship. And then our understanding, and Nevin, please correct me or Caroline, is that as laws have changed over time, even this document that was originally adopted in 1963 has evolved to say compliant with the current law. So there's a degree of living document. Plus, if something pops up, I mean, this is us as a review board are just mandated to look at it with fresh eyes from start to finish. But if there's some discrete issue that pops up that the commission says this must be addressed because we're not in compliance with the law, then they can work with council to fix it.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, I'm not in supportive of the, having to redraw it, every time we get new data. The 10 year is a good standard. So I was just concerned what that could look like if, we get new data.
Any other, if I'm looking at section 14, then it sounds like we're in alignment on the status quo of 4 commissioners, 1 at large. Do you feel like we need to do a motion on the 10-year review? Or let staff go draft that and we can approve it the next time.
Do you need a motion for that, or that? Is that one of those dropping a pin that Nevin was talking about, so that we would know? If that is needed, then I would make the motion that.
My 2 cents.
Yes. Sorry.
Having a staff directive that we're all seeming in alignment on, and I don't love it. Just feels weird to approve something without pen to paper on it. So come back to the next meeting with language on that, and then we can approve that at the next meeting.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right. Now I do think we can probably approve section 14.
Does anyone have any thoughts about the at-large mayor, or what an agreement there?
I think it's okay now.
Yeah, I'm now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to simplify it, you could take out the commissioner at large and just stick with mayor.
Mayor.
But that's right. They said the same thing like 3 times.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I think the term commissioner at large is helpful, because for those who are advocating for at large, that's letting them know that some element of what they're advocating for is the status quo, and that, I think that's helpful. If I was an advocate for at large, that would be significant to me, that there's one member of the commission who is supposed to look at everything equally across the board.
All right. So does anybody have any suggested revisions to section 14? Because if we don't, let's get that approved and we'll keep going.
everyone okay with those powers granted? What's the other?
We'll do a motion there. So JP, you want to
Move to approve or adopt section 14.
second? Anybody second?
A second.
You want any other further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, it looks like there's nothing to do with 15.
Well,
Or not.
I think we do, right? I think that's part of the discussion that we're having about the way that they're elected, or am I wrong about that? 'Cause I think that's.
I think the language here, this goes back to it needs to be clear. Now we're under charter review, providing clarity in the language.
Yep.
This is probably ordinances or something that has happened in the past that has changed this language over time. So removing some of these changes to keep the charters clean. What does section 15 currently state that still stands? Right now, there's just 2 editor's notes.
Well, there's that exhibit A there at the back. So you've got all that.
Yeah. See there, and maybe somewhere else.
Right.
Just rewriting it.
It's effectively just codifying that each ward elects their own representative.
Well, we have 2 things going on here in section 15, manner of electing commissioners and mayor commissioner. We have, due to the Florida Elections Code, I know it says Municipal Home Rule Powers Act, but it's the Florida Elections Code. You have your Municipal Code Ordinance 2326, and that's that additional ordinance in the back. And different municipalities do it differently, but it's not unusual to do it the way we have, where we have an ordinance that's adopting the Florida Elections Code, and then it makes it part of the charter. That's essentially how
We have
Florida.
an ordinance adopting the Florida election code that says what?
this is how your elections are going to be run. So we have that, but then we also have the editor's note regarding the Battles case. And that has to do with, of course, we're going to have single member districts. So you can put that in the charter. Right now, it's not, because it's an editor's note, because federal law changed our charter for us. So
I mean, I like the idea of having it in the charter that we have wards that are all elected by members of that ward, whatever that's called.
Yeah, single
you
district.
can you can do that. Yes. You're just adding to the charter how it already exists.
I understand.
Yeah, from a readability perspective, it's a heck of a lot easier if we just have the actual language in there rather than a reference to an editor's note that we have to go search for that.
But that's what we just voted on in section 14. Each ward elects one commissioner and then one at large is the mayor. That gets that language, right? Or am I crazy? I think section 15, we have contracted that out to
It's
the supervisor
duplicative.
election.
It's duplicative is what you're saying.
And sometimes you'll sort of see that. Sometimes it'll get it slightly repeated, or there'll be sections that kind of overlap. But in 14, it tells you how many commissioners there are going to be, and that one of them will be a mayor at large.
How do we feel about,
But then 15 will talk about the manner in which, as it's titled, the manner in which they are elected. There's going to be single member districts, except for the mayor, which will be at large. That's what the language would be for that.
But that's all done by ordinance now. That's not in the charter.
Well, the election itself and how the election is done, that's by ordinance, and when the election takes place, now by ordinance. But having the single member districts is the second note. So there's two things that went on that changed this particular section.
So if we wanted to change the timing of the election, section 15 is where we should put it in. If we wanted to move it as part of the charter, from the spring to the fall, is this where it needs to be?
Article 4.
No, but that's what is odd, is that we have Article 4.
So if it's a duplicate and we remove section 15 and we clarify Article 4.
I agree with
I think
Mr.
that's-
Hayes. I think you could add one sentence to section 14 and you could strike 15.
the issue with the wholesale removal of 15 is that we don't have an express acknowledgement of following that final judgment in the Battles case. But before we even get to that, just amongst the board here, just hold on. Sorry, I'm we're all in agreement that we all want single district wards that are, you have to live in the ward and the ward votes on their own representatives, right? Okay. Caroline, can we make sure that's clear? Because I think it's, to Ron's point where it says to be elected from each ward, me being lawyer nerd here, I could say, well, they're from the ward, but they're elected by the all. Like that, I don't think this quite encapsulates or incorporates that. We would want language in here that makes it very clear whether it goes in 14 or maybe even 15 that says they're elected from each ward by each ward.
And they have to live in that ward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So can we make sure that that's clear wherever you guys feel like it needs to go? All right. We're in alignment on that. Okay. Then I know we want to talk about election dates, but then to Brandon's point here, talking about the second editor's note about formally the method of electing city commissioners from at large has been changed to election by district voting only pursuant to the final judgment basically in the Battles case, which that case stands for the proposition that we are going to have a majority minority district
And single member districts, yes.
and single.
That's
Okay,
the big
Okay.
thing, is the single member district. It's not so much the
Minority.
right, because it's not that, we're saying 5, then we let them redistrict the 5 to be, but the key here is, in that Battles case, was removing at large.
I didn't realize it was the first one. I get it now. Okay.
What I have seen, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to look for the ordinance here, and I'm not sure where I have it exactly, but what I have seen in a lot of charters where by ordinance, they have adopted the Florida Elections Code and also moved the elections. There will just be a sentence that says, we refer you to the ordinance that adopts this. And it'll be stated in there. And essentially what that's saying is that, yes, we know that the commission can make these changes, and we know that the Florida Election Code is part of our charter, but the state may change or alter the Florida Election Code. Whatever that is, we're saying here that that's part of our charter. It makes it much more simple to make that simple reference. And then as far as election dates, so.
Before we get to that, let's finish that. I like the idea of it being in the charter that it's single member districts elected by that district, and that's in the charter, and that's not by ordinance or anything like that.
Yes.
Okay.
That's how I will. That's how.
So if somehow the Florida Election Code changed and the commission says, forget it, we're going to be everybody at large, whatever, I want it to be confined by the charter. That's my 2 cents.
Two different subjects.
Yeah.
That's why I was pointing out it's two different subjects going on in this section.
Right.
So in lieu of the manner of electing commissioners and mayor commissioner, we clearly define the district, which is that.
That we have 4 districts, and you have to, I don't have to say from the district, by the district.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Yes.
And then 1 at large. Okay.
We can do that.
And then you started to touch on the election timing. Do we want to go that direction, or do we need to do something, address the battles case for the majority minority district? Do we leave that alone?
Well, you're addressing the battles case by having the 4 single member district wards. You're addressing that. But a separate issue is the date for the election and how I've seen other charters do it. And I've seen it both ways. Sometimes they actually put the dates in. We want to have it in, August primary, November. But I've also seen it say, we do it by ordinance because in reality, that is how it's done. Because even if you put it in here, we want it in November, it can be changed by ordinance. So I've just seen it both ways.
All right. So members, let's debate.
May I add one more just to clarify? So what the distinction is that the charter, when the election happens, is by ordinance and the commission deciding, but how the structure of it would be part of the charter, which is that explanation that I gave earlier, where if we only have 2 candidates running, then we skip to the November election.
So
that would be a charter change.
So those kind of, in my opinion, those kind of work together. I know exactly what you're saying, that the date's not mandated, but when you start also considering runoffs and when the date is strongly suggested, even though it's not binding, and then you have a runoff in December, those to me work together. So like as the board members, does somebody want to start with the discussion on basically, do we put this in the charter? And if we do, where does it go? And then what the election procedure should be?
We can. So are we going to wrap up Article 2 before we move to Article 4, which is the elections? Or do we want to go ahead and jump ahead? I think we all know where we stand on the Article 4. But
And it's in both places. I mean, we're back to be terms and all that. I mean, it's all.
Let's give ourselves some grace, and this is naturally just leading down to this.
Let's go up to 4. So conversation from me is, and I've received this information from a lot of people in Ward 1, is moving the election to the general. The Tallahassee initiative was actually something that I've had some neighbors discuss with me of doing. If you have 2 candidates, those candidates are not part of the, what do we call it, the nomination election. That moves to the general election in November, right? And or if there's more than 2 candidates and potential for a runoff, that runoff will be aligned with the general election. So
It would be August.
yeah, which would be right. November. The runoff would be November. It would take
I'm misunderstanding. Say it one more
the
time.
nomination election in August if there's more than 2 candidates.
If there's more than 2 candidates.
2 nominees.
And if there's only 2,
There's only two, it would be replaced.
It's November.
So you're familiar with the Tallahassee style, and that's what you're
Yeah.
suggesting.
Got a lot of feedback.
Although I think, Mr. Chairman, the only thing the board needs to consider to provide clarity on is right now, our charter prevents a runoff if somebody gets 50% plus one. The Tallahassee initiative says it doesn't matter if you have, 4 candidates and like 2 of them get like 2 or 3% and one gets like 80 and another one like 18, then the 80 and the 18 go to November for the purpose of having, the decision will always be made in November amongst 2 candidates. That's the way Tallahassee is set up.
That's what I was trying to explain.
So that's also, I would say no to that. I would say 50 plus one.
50
and
plus
then-
one.
No, it would still be 50 plus one. That's how Tallahassee arranges it, is that it's.
So the question would
50
be,
plus
if there's
one.
3 candidates in the nomination period, primary, whatever you want to call it, and one of the candidates 50 plus 1, do they automatically win, or do the top 2 go on?
That's how our system is. Tallahassee says top 2 candidates, no matter how many they get, the top 2 candidates go to the general in November, and that way the largest number of turnout is voting on the.
So then there could be 3 candidates,
Yeah.
one takes 50 plus one in August, or they don't have to, they take the election.
So something to think about, and I will pick 2 separate counties. Okay. I'll pick Alachua County and I'll pick Bay County. Okay. Alachua is more Democratic. Bay County is more Republican. You could conceivably have a primary in August where you don't have as many Democrats showing up in August, just like in Alachua County, you may not have as many Republicans. That's why November, everybody shows up. So I think that's the thing that I would consider, is that if you truly want the most number of people deciding who your commissioner or mayor is, that is always going to be in November. I think that's the spirit of the Tallahassee.
So you say it in a way that there will always be either a runoff or a primary election in November.
Well, it would be a general. I wouldn't. Yes, sir. That is correct. Either only 2 people qualify and they immediately go to November, or the way Mr. Berg just described it, doesn't matter what your percentages are. The top 2 vote getters in August, if you have 3 or more candidates, advance to the November general. And that's how Tallahassee set it
I
up.
would disagree, having been in those positions before, that if I work my tail off and get 50% plus 1, I'm done.
You shouldn't have to go another.
I don't have to go to another election.
But if you,
But
No,
if I
no,
don't,
you're gonna
like I have, and I got 48%, then I do move on to November. But if I get 50 plus 1, I'm done.
but from a voter perspective, protecting the integrity of,
It's not my fault you didn't turn out to the election.
Respectfully, you could say that in the spring. You could say that in April of 2023 as well.
Exactly right.
Cecile?
Yeah, I hear what Ron is saying, and having been the spouse of somebody who ran for office, it is a lot of work, and I'm very sympathetic on an individual basis. But this isn't really about the candidate. We're trying to engender a broader connection with more citizens, because that we feel that will create more acceptance of laws and ordinances passed by the city commission, more people participating with sharing more ideas, because you're going to have different ideas from different segments of society that may not have participated earlier. And just the benefit of that, I think, outweighs the discomfort of the individual candidate, which I completely agree with Mr. Dancy. On a personal level, that's quite true. It's a hardship on the candidate. But I still lean in favor of moving the final election to November, regardless of the percentages.
JP?
Few things. First of all, I think guiding principle we should have is that if the commission can do it by ordinance, It's better off for the commission to do it as the duly elected representatives of the people. I think that they took this up last year. They decided not to move the date of the election. I don't think that our role as the charter board should be to get into something as a political decision for the people. I think if the political elected officials want to change it, that's the place where that decision should be made. So that's sort of number one. Number two, I don't like the idea of moving the date of the election. I think that we're confusing this notion that quantity of voters will somehow improve the quality of the participation. I think that this will be an item that's stuck at the bottom of someone's ballot and half people won't even know who the candidates are for their city commission. I think that it's been really good the way it is, that people who are actually turning out to our city elections want to participate. I think it, in a sense, helps the candidates because their target audience is less. I think it will make these elections more expensive, more complicated, and will not improve our governance.
For what it's worth, I agree with you.
We got a lot of varying opinions.
Who said that?
That was really.
I'm just saying it, Cecile.
Who said that they agreed?
Ron,
I think if people who are not in the screen, it would be really helpful to say your name. Also for the record, before you speak. And I'll try to do the same too, because I'm not in the room.
Ron, how do you feel about the date of the election?
After hearing JP, I have been swayed, I think, because a busy November ballot is busy. And there are always undervotes. It meaning
What
that
about
people,
votes?
meaning that people will come and vote for the president or the governor
Oh,
and
understood.
nothing else. There are
Having participated in elections,
hundreds of them just in Bay County.
Yep.
That only vote for one, and they might vote for a county commissioner and nothing else. And so, to JP's point, which now it does give the city our own space. And there, like I said, we're not in control of who comes out to vote. We do our best as somebody running for an election to get those folks out. But I like JP's idea that it does give us autonomy, if that's the right word.
Yeah, it definitely attracts a more engaged voter, right? They're there to vote in the Panama City municipal elections and that, not because of some other reason. Daniel.
Primaries, Daniel Schultz, Cecile. Primaries attract the more fringe voters. When you look at the data, the more far right and the more far left candidates that pay more attention to the news tune in and vote more often. So you do have a point there when you say that you might have a more informed electorate. But my question is, how do you improve the informed electorate? If we constantly take the opinion that the public cannot learn or will not do something, they never will. And so I think, once again, we do have a semi-informed electorate, but I would not call could we get a survey on what the percentage was of the municipal turnout for this last election?
we can look that up.
Yeah, I would have to look it up, but
Okay.
it's
low.
It's low.
So I would not call that satisfactory by any means. Okay, when you have less than 2,000 people selecting a commissioner in a ward of 7,000 plus, I would not call that satisfactory. So even if you had a few hundred people that only clicked president and clicked whoever else, I think it is important to give that opportunity for more people, because I cannot tell you, as someone who ran, I cannot tell you how many people ask me, did you win? Can you imagine that? That people on the street ask me, oh, are you still running? Did you win? They don't know. That's how uninformed the electorate is. So I think by increasing the ability for people to vote. Just like Cecile said, there is so much opportunity for nonpartisan organizations like the League of Women Voters and others in our town, as well as the city itself, to advertise and make clear that these are nonpartisan elections. Here are the responsibilities of a city commissioner. And here's why we think that we should move it to November so that we could catch more fish.
But you understand that adding voters makes that problem worse of what you're talking about. That there's going to be more people who are less informed. So it doesn't solve the problem of information. Will be giving it its own space and keeping that election in the spring the way it is now.
What are you basing the uninformed nature of the voter on?
Well, because it's the same thing where we have a 10% or 5% turnout. Just because you're adding more people, it does not mean that they will be more informed about city politics.
Doesn't mean that they won't either. I mean, by putting it,
maybe less informed.
by putting it on the ballot, you get a sample ballot. Everybody gets a sample ballot. Okay, something that I do, I go down a sample ballot ahead of time and pick what I'm going to vote for everything ahead of time. I know many informed citizens who do that. Citizens that don't feel that local politics has any effect on their life don't vote in it, but they vote in national politics because they feel as it is more important. Maybe we haven't done a good enough job at selling how important city politics is. And a good way to start doing that is to get more people involved in it, and that is by moving the election. Like I said, if you give the sample ballot, like I said, how many people will look down that ballot and say, oh, I have a new office here. Who is this and who will I choose? I don't think there's as many willy-nilly voters that just Christmas tree their ballot as we're anticipating.
You get a sample ballot for the April election too.
Right. Yeah.
Or all elections get sample ballots, not just presidential.
I got you. But
Yeah.
But it is fair that there is a lot more energy and chatter around our November elections every even year. I think we all would admit that.
Voting,
Okay. So I have three things here. Number one is, I've actually gone back and forth on this, on having an independent election or aligning it with the general election. I walked in here thinking the more people, the better. That that's always a good thing. But I really do appreciate that, you're getting asked the same questions in the independent election as with the general election. Ron's point is that you have undervoting. And then it also seems like you're going to be tied to, if you have some political movement nationally, whether it's Obama getting elected and drives a bunch of that vote, or Trump getting elected and driving a bunch of that vote, it kind of just sways the tide of who's going to show up. I think you probably have less informed voters on the whole, because you have people that are voting for the national level because they're passionate about that, and then they're either not voting for the thing, or they're like, oh, I saw Daniel's sign and it's got pretty colors, and therefore, whatever you end up doing with that. The more I think about it, I think having an independent election of whether it's a lower number, but it's more engaged, makes sense. But then with that said, the second part to JP's comment, is this something that we mandate in the charter, or if it can be done by ordinance, like let them fool with it.
Let the political branches fool.
So my vote right this second is, I would prefer it be independent, but my overall vote would be just leave it out of the charter as it is now. But then we have the primary runoff type situation. And if I was in Ron's shoes 100%, I would be exactly saying what Ron was saying. But I like the idea that you have a general election and then the winner walks out from the general election, no matter when it is. But that's sort of like the runoff thing just feels awkward to me, that you feel like you win, but you don't, and you keep going. And then,
Well, also, I just want to add
the
that
last point is, my vote would be top two candidates, regardless of votes, go to the general election, whenever that would be, and then the winner walks out.
my apologies, I finished. To address your concern, there is, I believe the Tallahassee style is, if there's only two candidates, then there isn't an August primary. They would skip that. It's only if there's more than two.
To my point of having run an election more than once, is that if I'm in the primary and I get 60% of the vote, and then the other two split, that means I've got to run again, having the majority against somebody that's 20% when I've clearly already won. That's just my point. I probably won't down that hill, but that's,
The challenge, Mr. Danzy, is that in August, whether it's gubernatorial or presidential year, the turnout percentage is not that much higher than our spring odd year elections. You're looking at 24% and 23% respectively the last two August primaries, and we were 19 and 23% for our elections. So again, the November elections, if you want to be elected, that's the argument. I'm not saying I agree or disagree. The argument is you see just a phenomenal higher percentage in November of the even years than you do August of the even year or spring of the odd years.
Could we get some numbers on that, like some real data to what the increase is?
We can just kind of look back over the last maybe decade and share.
You already gave us those numbers.
She does. But we'll put it in a neat one-page.
So are we, I'm not calling for a vote, I just want to kind of gauge in the room here. At least on the issue of putting in the charter the date of the election. Is it something that we want to do or not?
I think we should. This is Cecile. We should, after debate and consideration and getting the numbers, I think our role is a very special role, as nothing has really changed in 60 years. And normally, if there were active review and active going back and forth, I could be convinced. JP, your arguments were excellent, and to the point and very persuasive. But I think we're coming in and we have a heavy lift. We're trying to bring people along and have people start thinking about looking at the method of governance after being sort of, mixed metaphors, we've been Rapunzel or asleep, whatever that fairy tale is where someone's asleep for a long, long time. We're waking everybody up, and we're shaking our locks, or I'm mixing up these fairy tales, but we're waking everybody up and we're getting everybody re-engaged. And I think going forward, then it would be in a better position to leave the work to the commission. But I think we're trying to kind of clean things up.
So are you suggesting?
I'm saying I think we should. I think your initial question is this, which is what JP was mentioning, should we even deal with this in the charter? And my comment to that is yes. I am leaning towards moving it to November, but I've heard some very persuasive arguments not to. But I do think we should address it in the charter, the date.
I think it's important that something is important. There is a standard, and then whether the commission or the board at the time agrees with it or wants to change it, there's a standard, right? And it's clear what that standard is. We have an opportunity now to review the charter every 10 years, and that standard may shift at that time. I don't think having a subjective tie to whoever's on the commission at that time saying, I want to, and I'm not saying that they will because they haven't done it in 60 years, but having the flexibility, should there be a standard for voting? We know that there is one for the national election. And the season and the spirit of voting, it comes down to convenience. And if you take the subjectiveness out of it and the emotional side of they might not be educated, they might be, right? Both ways. Ultimately, what is the standard that from my seat, I've gotten tons of feedback on this one of, yes, we want to move it to election season. That's convenience. And it's not convenient to show up in August. It's not convenient to show up in April. We've heard this. We've all heard this. It's hard. I mean, the guy sent us an email saying it's not convenient for you to meet in the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. When is it convenient to get air capture a vote? And then I do tend to agree with Mr. Danzy that if we're going to do a primary in August, if whoever takes plurality? Majority takes the election. There is no more need to have it printed to another election ballot. No more money spent. the locals have spoken, and if that's speaking in August, we don't need to make a shift away from that. We're just shifting the time.
Ron, on the election, I think I asked this right and I just forgot. On the election date, do you want that in the charter? And and if so, where do you want it?
I'm really sitting the fence. I hate to say that because I'm not that kind of guy.
Yeah, I get it.
You know, I have always thought, and I may be wrong, convenience is nice, but I haven't missed an election since I've been voting. If you want to vote, you're going to go to the polls and vote. I don't care if it's Christmas Day. If you want to go, you're going to go. And so I really, moving it is fine and dandy. Not moving it is fine and dandy. I mean, with me, if you're doing it for convenience, that's a whole nother conversation. Now, whether it should be in the charter, I think it should be in the charter. The five of us have to remember that the commission may not go for it and the voters may not go for it. Because all we're doing is making recommendations. So we just need to remember that. Because present commission -1 didn't, -2 or 3, didn't put it in there. They chose not to move it some months ago. So.
Brenda,
But I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Rick. Go for it. My bad.
go ahead and finish, Mr. Danzy.
But if we're ready to move on, I'm ready for a motion either way.
Yeah, my other question here. Yes, ma'am.
I was at that commission meeting when the commission voted it down. They didn't want it. Additionally, I think you're missing a major point here, is whether you do it at one time or we continue as we're doing it now, the point that you're missing is voter apathy. And you're not going to get any more voters out at a general election than you would at your primaries, et cetera. And education, as much education that is done over and over and over, because I participated in some of them, I have done some of those educational processes. The sentiment, quite honestly, in the community is, it really doesn't make a difference whether I go and vote or not, because they're going to do what they wish to do anyway. So I don't believe that changing the dates is going to make a difference. And to Daniel's point, education, there's some of us who, yes, we can understand it. We're educated enough. We do self-education. But you have a tremendous amount of voter apathy in Bay County, period. I'm not from here, but you have a tremendous amount of voter apathy. I have worked the polls for almost 20 years. I don't do it now, but I worked the polls for almost 20 years starting when I retired. And I saw it every single time. If it wasn't important, they didn't come out. Presidential election is different. That's entirely different. That doesn't mean you're going to get the responses that you want. I think somebody's doing this as a pet project or a self-serving because they think that they're going to get their folks in the way they want to get them in. And that's not a form of sophisticated gerrymandering to me. And I use that term loosely, that's what it is. But you have a tremendous amount of voter apathy in this county, in this city. You're not going to change. You're not going to change. And I've seen it for almost 40 years. I'm not from here, but for 40 years, I've seen it. Ward 2 has, what's the population in Ward 2? Can somebody tell me quickly? About 2,000 or something of that nature? I'm not sure.
8,304.
You know how many people showed up to vote last election? Not even 500.
Oh.
Not even 500. So
Sorry, finish the thought.
it's the voter apathy. And unless you solve that, and it's not going to be solved by education, quite honestly. You can lead a horse through the water, but you can't make him drink.
So one quick comment and then Cecile, and then we need to call this question. First of all, I guess on behalf of myself and the board, I really appreciate you guys participating. It's not only wanted but needed to get public input on this stuff that we've been asking for meetings now. So for you guys to take time out, a couple hours, I mean, I genuinely appreciate this. Y'all's insight's been awesome.
You're welcome.
You may ask if Miss Pitts wants to, she's been the whole time. I don't know who she is. She's no staff. She's a member of the public, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, if Ms. Pitts wants to say something, that's fine. And then Cecile, a comment here, and then we'll try to put a bow on this.
Did you want to hear from Ms. Pitts first?
I think Jonathan just noticed her. She hasn't asked for anything or anything like that.
Okay. You know, I think this is about opportunities, and I think to assume that nothing would change with the November date is, we don't know that. I think it's something that could be the combination of the date and the focus and the energy on that election. I think we could see some different results. It would be my comment.
So I know this isn't Robert's rules, because to call the question, you gotta have a motion. I understand that, but I guess, do we have a motion?
I motion that we adopt Tallahassee philosophy of moving the election to August. There are two or more, and it happens to run to a runoff. The runoff would be moved to the November election. If there is a plurality vote, it will not majority vote. That will move to the November election.
So the top two, no matter what they get, the top two go to November.
Yes.
That's how, okay.
Yes.
Wait, hold on. The top two go automatically, or if you get a majority, you win?
If you get a majority, you win.
That's not how the Tallahassee one is, but that's how we are.
Reference.
I appreciate you.
I don't think we need to reference somebody else's idea, Tallahassee, in any motion or anything.
I just want to do it so that I properly.
So it's word right. I'm gonna let you word it.
And presently our elections are on odd years. Is that correct?
Sorry, what?
They're all on odd years.
Yes.
Right?
And in the spring.
So when we say general, are we saying the presidential general year, or are we saying the the governor's race? I think is the other. Just that's every two. Just the question, right? So when we're moving it, which general is the?
It's every 2 years. Mayor runs every 2 years, and some
I think you guys will be addressing that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll most likely be 3 will run in one cycle and 2 will run in the other.
All right, so just to make sure I understand the motion, you're suggesting that we put that it aligns with the general election on the even years, and then there's a primary where the top 2 candidates go to an election, except for if there's a majority in the primary, that majority wins.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second for that? Okay. So any other motions?
Can I make a motion, Nevin? Or can I make a statement and someone else can adopt it as a motion since?
Yeah, even if you can't do the former, you can do the latter.
Okay. I motion
That's
that.
good.
I motion that we move the final election to November, and that the earlier election, if it's in August, the top 2 go on to November.
I will second that.
Okay. Nevin, for formality's sake, can Cecile make a motion?
Not really, but I interpret what Brandon did was making the motion, and then somebody should second.
I'll make that.
Fine. Okay. All right, I'm not going to get hung up on formalities here. If there's a motion in a second, then we'll debate it.
Right.
All right, so the motion on the table is to align the election with November, and then have the top 2 candidates, regardless of results, proceed on to the general election, at which winner wins. Is So I guess, Brandon, since you, whatever, made it or seconded, what's your, want to talk in favor of that? Okay.
In favor.
Was there any other debate on that? All right, then call the vote. Yeah, sorry.
You want to call the vote?
Yeah.
Chairman Berg,
Don't I vote last?
Is it gonna change?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Mr. Henderson Jansenius,
Yes.
Mr. Danzy,
No.
Mr. Ferrera,
No.
Ms. Schoon. Oh, she can't-
Yes,
She can't.
well, just for paper,
Mr. Berg. Chairman Berg.
Yeah, I'm a no on that one too.
Motion fails 3-1, 1-3.
All right, let's separate this a little bit. Is there a desire based on the motions that are being made? Is the concern on the date or is the concern on the method of election? Who said that?
I did.
Oh, Brendan did? Okay, gotcha. All right. Do you want to?
My main concern is the date. And again, ideally, we don't have to put the date in there at all. We'll let the city commission deal with it. The voters can lobby their government officials to change it if they so choose. You know, there seems to be some grassroots support for there. They can go talk to their city commissioners about it. In terms of the runoff,
Even though it feels awkward because we're not putting anything in the charter, do you want to, I guess, make that motion?
yeah, I move to not include the date of the election in the charter.
Second.
Any debate on that?
I would say we're very emotionally charged about this. We're getting deeper emotionally charged, right?
Yeah.
I would say we table it for now and let's ask more of the community because it's not something we need to make a decision today. We have the flexibility of tabling it, right? I did do homework before coming here prepared for this. I did ask a lot of citizens, but I've learned a lot more that I didn't hear from citizens today, right? So having it recorded and we're on Zoom, I think we can potentially table this to seek more feedback from the community. And maybe we should table it for now.
Yeah, I mean, like I know a little bit about Robert's rules. I know we have a motion in a second. JP would have to withdraw his motion if he wants to do that.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, then I think perhaps I'm trying to force a decision here, not because I'm pushing some agenda. I do look at the clock and I'm like, let's go.
Yeah,
that's purely where my head's at. So that's
And the
fine.
parade's about to start.
Yes.
Seriously?
The homecoming parade.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna be here.
All right. So then,
Here for a while.
all right. So then let's have
get us to make a decision.
let's have the minutes reflect that we discussed the election timing and the election process, and then we're gonna leave that as kind of old business for the next meeting. Is that fair?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I know my calendar appointment said we're here till 2. I'm fine. I can be here until 3. I don't know what you guys do. You want to keep going?
I'm okay.
Feel it's a good stop?
Today, I'm okay.
Okay. All right. Well, let's keep going. I guess then the next thing would be like if we're still, I know we kind of,
So then we gotta go back to,
yeah,
can we think of the terms? Because I think there might be some discussion there.
sure.
I'd like to make the recommendation about extending the mayor's term to 4 years. I think makes sense.
We're referencing section 18
Sorry
just for the record.
My apologies. They're in 18. I know that I had in the previous meeting started the conversation about term limits, I did a lot of more research and talked to a lot of folks about that. And I don't think that it makes sense to have term limits. I think term limits, the elections are better for term limits there. So I think the only change I would recommend in section 18 is to change our commissioner at large to be 4-year term.
Okay.
Why no term limits? Brenda, why no term limits?
Well, because I think the best term limits are going to be the elections where people can get them out. But the research that I did was specifically with municipal elections, that there seems to be a lot more games that are played with the folks who had term limits in terms of passing off the city commission seat to a spouse or to someone else because you have a smaller electorate. It led to more of those type of things.
Do you feel the same way nationally?
Well, it's neither here nor I think, and partly I don't know that there
I think
was.
it's pertinent. Do you feel the same way nationally?
In reference to what office though?
Just do you think term limits should only not apply municipally, or should they not apply all the way out?
Because I think the state has its own system that seems to work for the state, and I think we have a different system set up by the Constitution as well, and I think that works well.
So
Brenda, I agree with extending the mayor's term to 4 years, but matter of fact, when I ran for mayor, I made mention of that, and people told me it didn't make sense. But anyway, the having no term limits, I think that it allows some amuckness, if you will, in government. So I think that those terms should be, we've limited our president to 2 terms after FDR, but we need to look at the practicality of term limits for the mayor. There's only 2 terms. 8 years should be enough for the mayor to accomplish with the city commission, because the city commission, they serve 4 years, and if they're elected, they have another term. They should all, the commissioner should also have term limits, in my observation. But that will allow the mayor, number one, in a 4-year term, and if he has 2 terms, to have some continuity in governing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So can we just do a little bit more debate and then solicit the public comment?
Sure.
It's okay. So Brandon, what do you think?
I see it the same way that JP sees it, is we're not federal government, and this potentially is a career for a mayor or a city commissioner, but they also have no decision making. And they can't just hammer down and change everything, right? They are a board. They make decisions as a board, regardless of how long they've served on that board. That is at the voters' discretion, right? So whether there is or isn't a term limit, I think that comes to overreaching when it's the voters' decision at voting, right? We may want a longer. We may have a local that is, or somebody else that's not a local that we want for 8 years, 10 years, however long they are willing to serve. They are serving the people, right? They're not serving themselves. They're not serving the party. They're serving the people. I think that's different in local.
Cecile, what do you think on term limits and then the mayor term?
I think the mayor term should be extended to 4 years too. I think it might be very difficult for the mayor to focus on his agenda or his or her agenda, things they want to get done when they have to pull off every 2 years and run for office. I think that must be very distracting. And then the other question was term limits.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought really hard about term limits. I'm not sure that 8 is enough. Again, I think the local situation is very, very different from national and state, and we should keep what they're doing in mind as an illustration, but their powers and their authority is so much grander. It makes sense to limit, because they can really do stuff and make radical changes that it's more limited and more collegiate, so to speak, I think, on the local level. So I'm not sure that 8 years is a good year, good amount of time.
I'm generally not in favor of local term limits. And I do agree that the mayor's position should be a 4-year term.
Yeah, I'm in line on all that stuff. I think the national stage is much different. Just the statistics of national people being there for decades and decades, and the challenges of taking on a national incumbent are just not the same as a local. I mean, I know there's an advantage to being the incumbent on a local level, but not nearly to the extent of a state. And it's just looking back, and Jonathan shared with us, I mean, this is not an issue that Panama City has had hardly. I mean, right now we have all of the city commissioners, the longest tenured one has been there for 4 years.
Correct. Three currently right now today, just the facts. 3 of the 5 are there because they beat an incumbent. And the prior, the 2 that ran one open seats, Ward 1 and Ward 2, prior, the 2 candidates had defeated incumbents. So you have an established history going back 25 to 30 years of incumbents regularly being defeated on the Panama City Commission. So those, in effect, are term limits.
All right. So then, Daniel, Brenda,
I would agree. I mean, I don't think term limits are necessary for this type of level. And I would agree that, you know, the mayor's term, you could not pay me to run for mayor because you'd have to turn around and run again. I mean, there's just no shot. So I totally am in support of that. But I think as it relates to what we were talking about previously, we are seeing a bit of a consolidation here. Okay, so we're talking about limiting the electorate by keeping it in the municipal ballot. We are talking about extending the term limit of an elected official, as well as we are discussing not adding term limits as well. So I want to make sure that, you know, as it relates, if you just view those in a line, it looks like a consolidation of power right there. So
there's no term limits existing now.
right, which we're right, and I don't support them either. I mean, what Jonathan said, we have natural term limits. We don't have the same problem, just what you said about national, you know, incumbents and having to fight that uphill battle. But I do think that as it relates to the election issue, I think that, you know, increased turnout, if we are going to increase the mayor's term and increase, you know, local power in a sense that it should be more widely available to the public in relation to the election timing issue.
Brenda, as I look back over some of the history of the mayors in Panama City, seemingly it was in the best interest of the citizens, but that's up front. But on the back end, it hasn't been. And so that's why I suggest term limits for the mayor, 2 terms. And let someone else come in, because it's almost like a loaf of bread, if I may use that analogy. If you let it sit too long, it gets stale and it's not edible. So I support term limits for the mayor as well as for the commissioners. Look back over our city's history and you'll see this infrastructure in this city is lousy. And Jonathan is doing a good job of coming in and advising the current commission and the mayor in reference to getting things done. But just like this Charter Review Advisory Board, it hadn't been reviewed in 60 years. There hasn't been work done in this city in 60 years. So you need new folks coming in, invigoration, new ideas. Like I said, like a loaf of bread, it gets stale. I need to step out. I have a family issue with my mother.
The debate, or is there a motion?
We have a motion and a second to extend the mayor to 4 years.
So we did.
But no term limits.
We did not, the motion did not include term limits.
Okay, that was a motion. Yeah, that's fine. You want to make the motion?
Sure, I adopt that motion.
You made the original.
There you go. I did. All right. That's my
It
motion.
was 43 minutes ago.
No, man.
So is there a second?
Yes, Mr. Henderson Jensenius.
Oh, geez. I'm glad you're keeping it. Any other discussion on that? All right, Jane, you want to call that vote?
Sure. Mr. Henderson Jensenius.
Yes.
Mr. Dancy,
Yes.
Mr. Ferrera,
Yes.
Ms. Schoon, oh, she can't vote.
Yes.
And Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0 to extend the term of the mayor to 4 years.
Mr. Chairman, just for a point for the future, and I think this is something that Mr. Zimmerman and Ms. Smith and I can bring back at the next meeting, but I don't know if there's a thought to align it with certain wards. Because right now, the history has been the mayor runs with every ward. Now you're going to only put him or her with 2 of the wards. And do we just flip a coin and pick which 2 or that? But I only bring that up because that question will be asked at some point.
So if I can, as the chair, go ahead and provide it. I mean, this seems pretty easy. Just have the current mayor fill out the rest of the 4-year term and call it a day.
Oh, that would be, so the next election will be what wards?
2 and 3 are up. Ms. Lucas and Mr. Granger.
Unless the idea would be the mayor runs for election in a year and a half or whatever it is.
For a 4-year.
You don't have to, because by the time we're a year away now from presenting this to the commission, and by the time you get it to the voters, he's gonna have to run again.
He'll be on the
anyway.
same
So it'll be on out quite a few years.
So then, yeah, if it's approved, then he would fall with wards 2 and 3 then.
Yeah, he would always.
Do you want to have that discussion now?
I think the discussion should it align with 1 and 4 or 2 and 3?
So
I don't know that there's a way around that.
Well, yeah.
Well, I just know that in the, some of the conversations that Ms. Lewis Williams, Mr. Chairman, mentioned in the conversations, and Mr. Schultz did as well, the thought was that if we did move to August, November of the even years, that the mayor would go in alignment with the presidential cycle for maximum number of votes. That was again, there was a reason other than just the ward numbers to align that. So just sharing that as that was one of the considerations and one of the solutions or options that was provided in order to choose which 2 commissioners the mayor would align with.
So, okay, so it's clear that that's something that's going to have to be addressed. And I guess I'm asking the board, is this something we can discuss now or table that for next time?
I think we can table that. I need to think about that.
That's why I floated it.
Yes.
Well, I mean, this is the natural effect of making these decisions is there's, subsequent decisions that have to happen. I just want to know if we want to try to nail that down now, but if we don't, then we can come back. Just make that a note in our old business that we need to discuss if we do a 4-year mayor term when that election aligns.
Because if I have it correct, right, Ward 1 or the highest turnout wards. So in a sense, you would be motivating the highest turnout wards to come out and vote and have something to vote on in the years you're not voting. Just as a thought, but I don't know.
What,
Think about that.
what information would you want from staff to help make that decision? Or do you?
I don't know yet. I have to kind of game that out in my head.
Okay.
I'll think about that.
Wait,
I will.
Sorry, John, I don't know.
No. I will.
Maybe you can reach out to staff with
Yeah,
questions
I
and say,
will. Yeah,
I need further information.
I will.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I do plan to bring back a memo at the next meeting with 10 years of percentage turnouts for both our city elections and state and national in August and November. So because y'all asked for that data just to kind of compare. So,
I'll say, if you can provide that data to us ahead of time.
but yeah, sorry, I will provide it ASAP.
Okay.
So yeah.
Even better. All right, so then we'll put a pin in that and make a decision at the next meeting.
Can I ask a question? Why do we currently have it staggered? Instead of having every 4 years, we could potentially do it.
Well, I think the thought is that so that you don't have all 5 up at once and change all 5 of your elected officials in the middle of, that could be very, I think that would be very
To
disruptive.
have 5 brand new commissioners on the dais?
It's,
They're train wreck.
Yeah, that's. That would be challenging.
yeah,
I just remember back during election season, how many times did we see on social media, fire all of them, start fresh?
Yeah.
Like,
Can't
you
do
see
that.
that a lot. You really do. If the people are speaking, they ask for that a lot, but is it realistic?
I never saw you post that. I never saw you post that.
I'm just wondering the repercussions of what is disruptive. What would that look like?
Look, I respect all 5 of our elected officials. I've said that anybody that wants to run for office, I have tremendous respect for. It is not easy. And it is even after 10 years in DC, this local stuff is even more difficult. Okay. I'm just telling you. That being said, we have 2 of the 5 are brand new right now. And it takes a lot to learn, how government works, especially both of those men have a lot of history in private sector and it's different. I can't imagine having all 5. It would be very tough, I
I think
think.
the unintended consequence of that is it would also entrench staff. Because if you all of a sudden had turnover of all the commissioners who truly had no idea what was going on, it basically vests all the authority in the staff because they're the ones who could kind of control everything at that point.
Right, there will be no continuity of vision, right? There's every 4 years, you're going to disrupt the entire vision of the progress of the city. I mean, I think that would be.
And I'll just say, I completely agree with Jan on this. And I would just say that observations have been made, and I mostly agree with them. But if you'd like, I know we talked about the federal, but you look at the state level with term limits, and it's my opinion that term limits, at least in the legislature, have weakened the elected officials and empowered staff, which in my seat, I should like that, but I don't like it. And the lobbyists. Staff and lobbyists have been empowered in Tallahassee immensely.
Jonathan, that's very honest of you. I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Cecile, I would agree as a participant in at least state legislative hearings. I've probably testified and attended, I would say, upwards of 50 and in the last 7 years. And definitely the old timers, sometimes they get a little stale, as Brenda can say, but they bring the knowledge. They bring, this is why we did this 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And that kind of information is helpful, whether it wins the day or not. You just have someone right there who really knows, the front and back of things. And that's very helpful to hear.
Is the dynamics of the board currently, because the board doesn't make decisions, right? They just set policy. Jonathan executes that. You being the chief administrative officer of the city, who writes the vision for the city and executes that? That the direction may change based off of guidance from the board, so it shouldn't matter who sits on the board or how often it changes. You ultimately decide the operations of the city from your role.
Correct, with direction from the board. So the vision and direction of the city, in my opinion, should be set by the board and staff carries it out. And so
That's right.
obviously a part of that, especially your senior staff, your appointees or your charter officers, myself, Ms. Smith and Mr. Zimmerman, along with your department heads. So the people may not like the direction or the vision that's currently being cast, and the way to effectuate that is to, change your elected officials.
Yeah, in theory, the mission should be setting the strategy, right? We have a strategic planning session before each annual budget. They are the ones that are setting policy by strategically planning where the money will be spent in the budget every year.
Yeah.
All right, I'm trying to think of where to go with the next meeting. I know I have a hard out at 2:30 because I got to go back to my office and pick up my daughter.
Yeah, I would say so also that my 2:30 is a strong end time for me too. And I would say that if I had fully understood that my vote didn't count, I probably would have tried a little harder to make other arrangements. I understood from when the other Brandon appeared that I don't think anybody mentioned whether his vote could count or not. So I assumed that when you were allowed to participate remotely, as being on the board, that our vote would count.
Well,
I take it very seriously, so.
respectfully, maybe your vote's not on the paper, but your voice certainly counts. So that's not.
Oh, no, I perceive that my voice, excuse me, has counted, and I think you've been very generous to ask my opinion and everything like that. But I'm just saying, I'm glad that we clarified, that technicality, because I assumed that when we appeared that we could vote. And there are many other commissions and things like that where that are very important, that do allow people to vote from a distance. So that may be something that we consider down the road in the charter also.
Like that. Brenda?
What's the rationale for not only someone on the advisory board not being able to vote if they're not physically present, but it happens at the city commission meetings and other meetings as well? What's the rationale for that?
Caroline, it's in the law,
Yeah. But let me just interrupt. Cecile, I apologize for not making it clear earlier, but that's the way city commissions are. It's just the way the law is. If you're on the county commission, school board, or city commission, you have to be present. Now, the city commission could do different rules for its committees, but just the practice from a staff level has just been to suggest the same rules apply for city commission committees that apply to the city commission. But that's
So it's not really written in stone. It's just
not
practice.
Not for the committees established by the city commission. It is written in stone for the city commissioners and their meetings, but you're correct. It's not written in stone. It's more of a practice, and but
I see some rationale for it, because it's a big responsibility, and a lot of times just the body language, and when you're in the room, you see someone sit back, sit forward, you're getting a lot of cues that is more difficult. For me, when I'm away, it's more difficult for you all to see how I'm reacting to. So I see some benefit for it, but I think a lot of boards, corporations, foundations are allowing people, that have a lot of power to participate remotely. They may limit it in some way so that you don't get someone who's, I'm on my safari, I'm here, never there. But something to think about, that we may want to allow that, because pretty much every meeting that we have, we are talking about very important issues. And again, our particular time at the bat right now, because it's been nothing happening for 60 years, we do have, I think, a bigger responsibility, a bigger lift. And everybody on this board, I think, wants to have their vote count at all times.
A stale bread analogy again.
Yeah, I mean, if we're allowed to conduct our meetings however we want, then I have no issue with virtual attendance and virtual voting. If that's not, and it's a distinction without a difference, because it didn't change any votes, and we counted Cecile. And so whether the meeting minutes just say 4-0 or 5, I don't care. But anyways, I think we're on the same page here. So to wrap this up, I want to make sure kind of we all leave with the same message. We have decision on, I'm not reading that right. Mandatory charter review somehow aligned with the regular census on a 10-year basis, and you're going to come back with the actual language for that. That we're going to have clear language that the representatives of each ward are from the ward and elected by the ward. We discussed elections, and we decided to table that. Not only does it belong in the charter, but what that election process looks like. And then we were aligned in the revision of the 4-year mayor's term, with no term limits for any of the commissioners or the elected, the mayor at large. Was that?
And we voted to keep the present form of government.
Yes,
That's right.
Yep. Okay. So we will come back, and I guess we'll have old business to discuss the election, the procedure and the timing of the election. I had a second thing that we said we were going to come back.
Which election cycle the mayor will run in.
That's it.
And the election cycle for the mayor. Okay, so y'all get some thoughts on that.
And I think maybe, I don't know if we're ready to vote on it now, but I do think we should take a formal stand if we will allow remote participation and voting. Our little committee, I do think we should get that clear on the record. I appreciate the way you've handled it and I do feel very included, but
So put that in our meeting minutes that we have no issue with remote attendance and remote voting.
Can we get a consensus?
All in favor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
I do just want to state from a consistency standpoint, I did indicate to Mr. Henderson that he would be able to vote when he said he needed to participate remotely. And we did state that at the last meeting. I just think it's important that
I forgot it.
that we were consistent with Mr. Henderson, Jensenius, and Ms. Schoon. The consistency in the past was, we were consistent. That's all.
that's what I was feeling too. So I think the
I-
way to rectify it is just, Jen did take my votes down, just change the vote total. It won't change the outcome.
All right, we're on the same page here. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for creating the confusion.
There's a lot going on, Devin.
I think are a hair behind our slated schedule. That's okay.
You are dealing with some of the worst.
That's fine.
The stuff where the biggest changes. That's fine.
I want to help set an expectation for the other board members on what we plan to tackle the next time, which obviously we have city manager, city attorney, and then I think there's also some consideration of just overall mayor definitions and mayoral authority that needs to be addressed as well. So are there any other major things that we want to try to get to in the next meeting?
I think we should definitely wrap up the powers of the city, the duties and powers of the mayor. Got quite a bit filled up under just section Article 2. And then Article 4, the form of ballots, qualification of candidates, I mean, all of this. It would be great to get, I know the elections office wasn't here for this one.
Yeah, I'm not.
Is there additional feedback that they could get us coming out of Article 4 to kind of set us up for further discussion? So
We'll ask that question. So
I think if we could wrap these two things up, this was the biggest, before we move on to city manager, city clerk.
100%. That's exactly right. Yes. Okay. So if we could all read and understand and have thoughts on the remainder of Article 2 and then Article 4, then we'll be in a great spot to go into the next meeting and talk about city officers, city manager, city attorney, city clerk. Does that sound like a decent? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, do we want to plan for maybe a larger block of time? The next meeting is December 4th. I don't know if that if we plan for it in advance, if you need extra time, you're not.
I think the 2 hours is sufficient. I think there's also just some waning of debate after 2.5 hours of going through this stuff. It's not we're not the founding fathers here, so we can take our time.
You're the Panama City founding.
Second, what?
Like the modern day.
More like the Constitutional Convention rather than the articles, right? Is that what it was? There we go, going way back here. Okay. All right. So are we good on that? Review Article 2, review Article 4, have thoughts on those. We'll come back. Talk about election timing for mayor, talk about the overall election timing and election procedures. Anything else? And when are we coming back?
December 4th.
Oh, well then, have a great Thanksgiving. Have a great Halloween. Have a great
Town hall.
Oh, and the town hall is Saturday, November 1st.
8 a.m.
You all will have a seat. If you're not going to be there, please let me know so we don't put your placard out and that's on the news.
That's what they will pick up.
Yes, and
Empty chair.
Yes.
there will be coffee and dandy donuts. So
I knew it was the day after Halloween, so you know how Halloween is in the Cove. But I'll be there.
you can take a nap after the town hall.
So next meeting is when?
December 4th.
Yeah.
11:30 or 12 o'clock?
Noon. The meeting's at noon.
Okay.
I move to adjourn.
Wow, very good. Thank you.
All right, let's go. Let's go. All in favor. Everybody's in favor.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.